It was this week 4 years ago that the then Howard government launched a federal intervention into the Northern Territory's remote Indigenous communities. The intervention was in response to the Little Children Are Sacred report outlining rivers of grog and abuse in remote Indigenous communities. The former Prime Minister John Howard claimed it a national emergency and implemented a raft of quickly drafted policies that were brought in under bipartisan support. Northern Territory MLA Marion Scrymgour is one of the few politicians who spoke out against the intervention. Marion Scrymgour joins us now. Marion Scrymgour, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Laetitia.
The intervention has never sat well with you. 4 years on, how have your feelings changed?
I've always had reservations, but I've also looked at some of the initiatives and programs that have flowed into these communities. When you look at, the policing, the education, all of those programs that have gone into those communities, we didn't need an intervention to do that. They are programs and resources that should have been available to those communities.
The federal Labor government inherited the policy and modified it. They say they've removed discriminatory elements of the intervention, but are there still discriminatory aspects?
Look, I think that certainly, Laetitia, the smokescreen that's often run with the intervention, sure, the Racial Discrimination Act has been, put back and applied. What isn't happening is the federal government's not actually complying with the Racial Discrimination Act. And there are several things that happen in relation to Aboriginal communities that doesn't happen anywhere else in mainstream Australia, which still makes it discriminatory. So, using income management, putting services into education, having more police has got nothing to do with intervening in individuals' lives. There's certainly, with the new round of discussions that Minister Macklin needs to have, certainly, there needs to be a serious look at the legislation, which is absolutely discriminatory because they wouldn't implement that legislation anywhere else, and nowhere in that legislation does it talk about protecting children, which is what the Little Children Are Sacred report, had outlined, that there was, some serious issues in some remote Aboriginal communities.
What's been the impact of that level of discrimination on the ground in communities, particularly on individuals?
Look, the impact, particularly on men, I've noticed when I've travelled around, the morale and the impact on Aboriginal men has been quite a huge thing. I think that, the blanket was thrown over. Sure, you've had a couple of bad individuals, but rather than targeting where the problem areas was, the blanket was thrown over and everyone was put into the same bucket. So that has certainly had some huge impacts on men, where men have felt less able to individuals to participate in families and with jobs. The removal of CDP has certainly added to that, where people are just feeling, and there's a sense of helplessness in a lot of those communities.
Your strong stance against the intervention damaged your political career and no doubt took a personal toll. In hindsight, was it worthwhile, or do you feel that you took yourself out of the game?
Look, Laetitia, I don't regret for 1 minute speaking out as I did. I think someone needed to say something. I think rather than agreeing with... it was easier to agree. And I felt that I was a duly elected member of, from the electorate of Arafura. There was certainly a number of elements, like the compulsory leases. When you have a look at that legislation and you have a look at the role of government business managers, when Aboriginal people have a meeting, they can't conduct those meetings without having a Commonwealth agent in those meetings. There are a number of elements of the NTER which were absolutely, just discriminatory and should never have happened. No one disagreed that there were issues in terms of child protection that had to be addressed, that family violence and alcohol and, the issue of drugs was a major issue on the ground in those communities. However, they were discussions that the Labor government in the Northern Territory was having with the federal government, then John Howard and Mel Brough and that administration, for 4 to 5 years pre the intervention. So, you know, I mean, people were cynical. You know, I mean, I think that people thought, well, this will bring maybe the needed resources and financial support that we needed. That didn't come rolling for a long time, and if you have a look on the ground in any of those communities, there is a mishmash of programs going on. Some areas it's worked, but in a lot of areas it certainly hasn't produced any better outcomes than what was there pre-intervention.
Could the Northern Territory government have averted the intervention had it had a quicker response to the Little Children Are Sacred report, or was the Howard government always coming after you?
No, look, I think that it was always going to be used as a political football, and that's the unfortunate thing, because I think that